The article I will be speaking about is There's Real Skill in Fantasy Sports. It was originally written by Jennifer Chu. Basically, this article is speaking about the question if skill is really required in fantasy sports. So, FanDuel and the Dean of Engineering at MIT, Annette Hazoy, with her research team, were trying to answer this question by having different experiments. And as Annette says here, some fantasy players may not know about statistics, rules of the game, which players are injured, effects of weather, and a host of other factors that make them better at picking players. And that's the skill in fantasy sports. Basically saying that there's certain factors that make people have skill in fantasy sports and why it doesn't require luck. Also, there's sections in this article that speak about gambling and explain why gambling is not fantasy sports is not a form of gambling. The UIGA claims that it's not gambling because fantasy sports requires skill, unlike gambling, which is based off of luck, as some would say. So basically, the methodology to their experiments, they had three experiments. One of them was to look at the win loss record of fantasy sports players from the first half to the second half. Um, the other experiment that they had was to see fantasy sports, the winning percentages of players who played a lot versus players who played a little. And the third one was they made an algorithm of computer generated fantasy teams versus players who actually played, and they wanted to see who did better. So, regarding the results of those experiments, when it came to the win loss ratio, they made a graph. So, people, if skill was required, then your the first half of your season, whichever regarding whichever sport you played, it should be similar to the second half. But if it was luck, it'd be 50-50. And what they noticed is that on most graphs, the pattern was linear versus if it was luck, it'd be more like a circular cloud. So more of the time, it was skill that was required. And in the second one, they had a lot of players. They saw the percentages of wins from people who played a lot versus people who played a little bit, and the players who played a lot won often a lot more versus players who played a little bit. And the third one, it was again to see people who actually played versus a computer generated algorithm. And when you looked at that, you noticed that the people who actually played won more. So this article pretty much proves that there is real skill required in fantasy sports.